Good evening, the late edition. I'm Freddie Vasquez. This is Basement Politics, and I'm definitely coming on tonight.
Let's get it poppin'.
Good evening. This is Freddie Vasquez with Basement Politics Late Night Edition. Look at Yonkers. Beautiful. Good evening. If you're still up, thank you for joining me. If you're joining me, if not, hopefully you'll be watching tomorrow at some point. Tonight's episode, the Yonkers desegregation case, the next generation. Do we still have racism existing here in the city of Yonkers? Today I was, today's still Thursday, right? I was sent an email and some text messages in regards to a certain individual here in the city of Yonkers and their history in the desegregation case of the 80s. And if maybe you don't remember, if maybe you might be too young, back in the mid and late 80s, Yonkers went through a desegregation era where they were ordered by a judge to desegregate housing, public housing, the schools in particular. But there were a lot of other things that were pretty much segregated. Yonkers was almost like, Mississippi or something back in the 80s. It was really bad. And it divided Yonkers along racial lines specifically. And it was very heated around that time. I was very young. I don't remember it much, but it was a very tumultuous time, and a lot of emotions, and people were just ready to go at each other. I wanted to go over that a little bit because I was sent that information and I read it and I just found it to be very interesting, and I was very shocked by it. So I'll talk about that in a bit, but let's get into it. Anyway, again, I'm Freddie Vasquez, Basement Politics, and tonight, Yonkers desegregation case, the next generation. Tonight, I want to discuss racism, and in particular, the Yonkers desegregation era of the mid to late 80s. That probably was the first time Yonkers had made like national news. People across the country watched and read about the fight that began in the streets of Yonkers, right, among the people, and then made its way into the courtroom. Yonkers is a suburb just north of Manhattan or New York City. Some people consider it upstate. I don't think we're upstate. We're fairly close to Manhattan, and you can actually put a foot in the Bronx and a foot in Yonkers. Yonkers is a place where many who commute to the city for work come to buy or rent to escape the crowd noise and to find a peaceful place after a long day of work. A lot of times you get people that just come here to live, lay their head, but they spend a lot of time in the city working. So they're not kind of really involved all that much, they just go to bed and go to work. Back in the 70s and early 80s, however, Yonkers began seeing a wave of folks moving north into Yonkers from various boroughs of New York City, but especially the Bronx, to escape the increasing crime and deteriorating quality of life. However, some might say they moved out of the boroughs to get away from Blacks and Hispanics, right? As the city began to see a lot of, particularly Hispanics coming from Puerto Rico and stuff, a lot of Cubans in the 80s also. The 80s was a turbulent period in the country, but especially in New York, right? With the crack era. Forget it. The crack epidemic hit New York City hard. And although Yonkers was the place people moved to in order to escape the city, Yonkers was not spared from the horrors of that crack era and that came along with the 80s crack era and epidemic. It destroyed communities, but none were more impacted than the Black and Hispanic communities. In Yonkers, the south and southwest side, as well as the northwest parts of Yonkers, is where mostly Blacks and Hispanics settled in Yonkers. And for now, again, anyway, remains largely that way. I grew up in the southwest side of Yonkers on Buena Vista Avenue. In fact, I was raised in the building that's owned by Nader Sayage currently, 189 Buena Vista. I found that to be interesting. I grew up there. That was predominantly Hispanic Puerto Ricans at the time. You didn't really find too many Mexicans or Dominicans. It was predominantly Puerto Ricans, and we didn't have too many blacks in our neighborhood. Although, you started to get more blacks moving in the 90s. And, Latinos, Hispanics, we can be racist. I know some of the old school Hispanics were a bit racist. So when that started to happen, it was almost like, oh, there goes the neighborhood. And I'm like, we're not in a much better position to be, while you're talking that stuff. But there was that even racism, among the Hispanics and even blacks. There was some issues at times, but not too much. We, for the most part, got along. But yeah, we never really ventured out. I never went out at Buena Vista in that area. So, we didn't go to, at the time, Lake Avenue. I had a lot of Italians, southeast side, northwest side, or northeast side, I should say. We never went out there. That was like a whole nother world for us back in those days. We just chilled in our own neighborhood. It's not like now everybody has, multiple cars and they're everywhere. So that's kind of how it was. And it still is pretty much that way today. If you look in, at Yonkers, you'll see, Hispanics and blacks and, people, minorities largely congregated in that southwest side of Yonkers, and northwest. You see more of the black community there. Yonkers has always had a large Italian and Irish population. The diversity that Yonkers has to offer has always been its gift and curse. Although Yonkers also consists of Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Polish, Arabic, and blacks, it's largely remained segregated. As I mentioned before, Hispanics have largely been congregated on the south and southwest side, blacks also on the south and southwest side, but largely more on the northwest, while the Irish dominated the southeast side. And I don't mean that in any way negative. That's just they have kept a beautiful, tight-knit community there, over the years. And after visiting McLean, last week on Saturday, the parade, I can tell, right, that they have a great sense of community there. I did. I enjoyed it, and I can see that, and I think that's dope. I grew up on southwest side, again, like I said, in Buena Vista. Again, Nader Sage owns the building. I thought that was interesting. The only, we also had a quiet, for the most part, and tight-knit community as well. The only difference was that we were poor and we were not able to afford to purchase, a home. So we lived in these old tenement buildings that had roaches and rats. Sure, there were fights, and the occasional police call, but I can assure you that has happened everywhere in Yonkers, and especially on McLean over there, after a few brews, but sure, crime and drugs was occurring at a higher rate in the black and brown neighborhoods, but there was no direct correlation between one's race or ethnicity, that determined whether or not they would be a criminal, right, or a drug addict, right? It had to do less with race, and in my opinion, and more to do with class, as well as other socioeconomic and systemic factors that must not be ignored. However, back in the late 80s, you couldn't have told some folks that, right? Because all the problems were based on the race, right? You're black, you're going to commit crimes, you're going to use drugs, or you're Hispanic, whatever, Yonkers was largely segregated, and in some ways it still is. The difference back then was that there was an active effort, and there may still be one now, but there was definitely an active effort to keep every facet of the city segregated. It was not just limited to people living, among their own kind and in their own neighborhoods, right? No, it was every part of the city, as if there was some unspoken, really separate and not equal, right? Separate, not equal law that they had here in Yonkers, because it was separate and things were not equal. Not only was public housing and affordable housing all kept to the poorest sections, black and Hispanic kids were assigned schools located in predominantly black and Hispanic neighborhoods. Unfortunately, they were the poorest, had the highest crime, and therefore the city did not think it was worth their time to provide a good quality education. So those schools in that side of town largely remain ignored. They also, the city also, I should say, failed to employ blacks and Hispanics. There weren't many joining the police department or the fire department or any of the city jobs, really. I remember as a kid, we rarely, like I said, left Buena Vista. We would travel to Sprainbrook Park, go swimming. And that for us was like an adventure and a treat. Many times we would swim, actually, right there down on the block, when the city would bring this big truck. It's like looked like a large dump truck, and they would fill it up with water from the fire hydrant, and we swim in that. It'd be freezing as hell, but we loved it. You know, it was free, and we were in it. So we have fun, and then I miss those programs. You don't see those programs anymore. They come there every day in the summertime, and they bring lunch and a bunch of activities. And I thought it was cool. You know, so that was cool. It was at Sunset Park at the end of Buena Vista, I believe it's also called Old Boyle Park. Like I said, they would fill up the water from the fire hydrant, which was freezing, but we swam in it. And then later after that, we would go and borrow someone's monkey wrench, as we would call it, or pipe wrench, and open up the fire hydrant and playing that with no sprinklers. We just had an empty can of beans, right? And we cut both sides out, and we would use that to direct the water. So we had a lot of fun, but we also had a lot of struggle. Even as a kid, I noticed some whites would treat my grandparents, and even the way, they would, certain way and condescending, they look down on them, and the way they would look and talk to me, even as a kid, I knew it was wrong. But what bothered me even more was that my grandparents were talked down to, right? That used to bother me as a kid. It just, and I, even as a kid, I knew that it wasn't right, it wasn't okay. But as a kid, what can I do, right? Something I said, I vowed to myself I would never let happen to me as an adult. And maybe that's why I'm like that. You ain't gonna say nothing to me. And not that I'm looking for problems, but I don't allow people to just talk to me any way. And I had an incident, this week, and I wouldn't say the incident, but an attorney contacted my wife. He had contacted me also, but then he reached out to my wife again, something that he was looking for. But the way he spoke to her was very disrespectful. So I went to his office to see what the issue was, because I'm not going to allow people to talk to my wife or me like that. And that's just, and I demand respect. And not that I went to be violent, but I went to let him know very clearly and very firmly that I don't appreciate it and it will not happen again. Right. So because I got that as a kid, I would see that happen to us, and I'm not saying all white people were like that, because I'm not against white people. I love white people. I love everybody, really. And I had a lot of, white friends. I sound like the white people that say, oh, I got black people friends, no, but I do. And I really appreciate it. And it's, some Italian guys actually that kind of showed me the ropes in life, in the business and stuff. And, I give them a lot of credit for where I'm at in my life. So, it's just saying, as a kid though, growing up, I would see that. And, it bothered me. And I just said, I'm not going to allow people to talk to me that way. Being treated that way reminded you that you were poor, right? And of a group of people that were not good, good enough. My grandparents did not speak English at all, really. And hence why I would be in these situations with them, because I was the translator, right? And so were many first generation kids who were born in the country here, because my mother and father were not born here. They were born in Puerto Rico, though it's not another country, but might as well be. Might as well be. Many who attended the worst schools. We were the ones who attended the worst schools in Yonkers, and that was until 1988, when the judge ordered that the schools be desegregated, I should say. And that was a man by the name of Judge Leonard Sand. He ruled that Yonkers city officials had intentionally segregated public housing and schools along racial lines. Intentionally. Right? I want you to remember that. That did not sit well with some residents, who decided that Yonkers was going to remain just the way it was, come hell or high water. Leading the charge to keep Yonkers segregated was a Republican, a woman by the name of Bernadette McLaughlin. If the last name rings a bell, it should. Bernadette is the mother of Republican Liam McLaughlin, who is the city's of Yonkers' current inspector general. This information was sent to me this morning, and it blew me away. I couldn't believe that the current city inspector general's mom was one of the individuals that spearheaded a coalition to prevent public housing to be developed on the east side. She thought everything was just fine. There was no need to integrate anything in any of the housing or schools, right? So I wanted to show a slide real quick here. I don't know if you can see that here. Actually, it's the wrong one. I want to show this here. And I want to show you just some of this is from the New York Times, really quick. It says, Miss McLaughlin, is that the beginning? Yes, Miss McLaughlin. I'm sorry. I'm starting at the wrong spot. I want to, I don't know why it's giving me a different one. Let me see. Hopefully I'll get to the one I wanted to start at. But these are from screenshots that I got. And there you see Liam in the middle there. That's a picture I wanted to show you. That's a fire hydrant there. That's what we used to do back in the day. Right, see the kid, he's got a little can there. But I want to get to the picture. All right, there we go. All right, so Bernadette McLaughlin lives on the east side of the city. Margaret Puryear on the west side. The two women share a deep nostalgia about a lost past and fears about the future, but they inhabit separate worlds, divided by far more than the Sawmill River Parkway, the concrete barrier that runs between them. Miss McLaughlin is white. Mrs. Puryear is black, and they are two women, obviously, who both reflect their neighborhoods and help lead them. Mrs. McLaughlin is the president of her civics association. Mrs. Puryear active in her tenants council, and in a city found liable in federal court for keeping blacks and Hispanics separate from whites. To talk to them and their friends is to discover the depth and complexity of emotions behind the 7-year-old lawsuit, right? Miss Puryear lives in a crime-ridden public housing project in a rundown neighborhood. She has few alternatives, according to a federal judge who ruled in 1985 that over 40 years, Yonkers built 97.7% of its public housing in one corner of the city. Wow, for 40 years. And they had an effort to keep it that way. And the schools as well for 40 years. This is what the judge ruled, Judge Leonard Sand. I want to read this also. Miss McLaughlin lives with her husband, Patrick, and their 4 sons in the Dunwoody section of the city. The streets lined with Cape Cods near Catholic churches and Italian delicatessens. The neighborhood is only 15 minutes from the South Bronx, where Miss McLaughlin grew up and fled, is what it says. The family fled over 20 years ago with other whites when they no longer felt secure. The Hispanics are coming. The blacks are coming. Run. I remember coming home one night and thinking, who are all these people out on the street? I don't know them, Mrs. McLaughlin said. The houses in the southeast Yonkers are filled with people like the McLaughlins. Really? The children of Italian and Irish immigrants who settled in the Bronx are themselves refugees. Refugees. They call them refugees. Really. From their old neighborhoods, they are teachers, police officers, and small business owners. I don't know if they're refugees. What they are saying has been said before in other cities confronting court order desegregation. Much of it can be found in the court transcripts here, recounting the passionate community debates from the 1960s through the 80s. To hear the talk about what's happening in Yonkers is to wonder again where concern for family and community ends and racism begins. Are we really prepared to live in a society that guarantees equal opportunity regardless of race? Asked Joshua P. Bogan, who was the lead trial counsel for the Justice Department, which, with the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, sued Yonkers in 1980 over discriminations. We are finding that there was I can't read the rest, a long history, but they've been doing this for a long time here in the city of Yonkers. Major lawsuits. All of us work for our homes. Patrick McLaughlin said, this is the Inspector General's dad. Our houses are our major investments. We are not anti-integrationists. Show me some black guys who are working, and I'll go out and get people here to sell them houses. But we don't want any free rides. We're talking about a subculture of poverty, the crime-ridden, non-working poor people with lesser values that we don't share. The McLaughlins sat in their dining room table with 2 friends, Jerry Lungarzo and Bob Guldner, talking about the judge who says Yonkers must build low-income housing in their neighborhood. They talked for hours about their lives, their homes, and their fears. They are solid citizens. Ms. McLaughlin is an assistant chairman of the committee on the handicapped in the community school district in the Bronx. Mr. Longarzo is an assistant principal at a Bronx elementary school. Miss Goldner or Mr. Goldner is retired from the New York City Police, struggled to buy houses or buy homes. Around that table, the issue of public housing and civil rights seemed inseparable from their own experiences. When they talked about discrimination, they talked about that they suffered by their immigrant parents. When they talked about housing, they talked about how they had struggled to buy their homes. When they talked about their fears, they talked about the Bronx. That's right. They described it in idolized terms. In urban America, where everyone worked hard and no one locked doors, the Bronx was a paradise lost, unquote, Mrs. McLaughlin said. I'm sorry, no, Mr. Longarzo said, not Ms. McLaughlin. So yeah, so that's a New York Times article. I did share it on the page. I also want to read this. Jack O'Toole and Bernadette McLaughlin spearheads of the opposition to Judge Sand, the judge that ruled that Yonkers had been purposely segregating the schools and housing, and they needed to stop it immediately. Leaders of the Save Yonkers Federation, that was the coalition of neighborhood organizations intermittently allied with Spallone, but now rife with the aforementioned suspicion that the mayor has caved into forces of compliance. Right, he didn't want to get sued, which remains strong in the city's political and commercial establishment. Henry Spallone is not fond of Jack O'Toole. Raymond Fitzpatrick, architect of a famous Supreme Court victory allowing white firemen to challenge racial quotas in Birmingham, Alabama, now signed on by Yonkers under civic pressure orchestrated by O'Toole and Miss McLaughlin as legal. I always said, I'm sorry, it cuts off. I apologize. So yeah, so that's some stuff I shared. You can actually read the whole article if you go on my page, The Basement Politics. I got several articles there from Yonkers Times and other news magazines or newspapers there. This says here, space convenience for drugs. So Miss McLaughlin and others felt that they were going to just build these townhomes over on the southeast side, and it was going to bring drugs and people just hanging out and doing nothing all day, just freeloading, taking a free ride. So the idea, the architect that they had, the idea was to build them in a way that it wouldn't allow for that somehow to happen, I guess, making the space convenient for drug merchants and other criminals. Bernadette McLaughlin of Save Yonkers is, to understate her views, unconvinced. Like many people in Yonkers, she grew up in the Bronx and she has vivid memories of what happened when the projects moved into her old neighborhood. The townhouses, crack havens. That's what they're going to be. That's what she predicted. Were they crack havens? I don't think so. I don't even know if they ever built them. Ryan Fitzpatrick, architect of famous Supreme Court victory. Let me just finish here. A challenge of racial quotas in Birmingham, Alabama. Basically, he was challenging, the racial quotas for white people, on behalf of white individuals, right? He signed on by Yonkers under civic pressure orchestrated by O'Toole and Miss McLaughlin as legal general in its war against Judge Sand. Supporting players, former mayor unhorsed by the housing imbroglio, assorted councilman. I just kind of cut that off. But anyway, go check that out. I think that's very important there. It's history and it's super important. Leonard B. Sand, a federal judge in New York who presided over a 27-year landmark case in which found that the city officials in Yonkers had intentionally segregated public housing and schools along racial lines. He actually died back in 2016 at the age of 88. So I also posted that up there so you can check that out. I think that stuff is very important. So do we still have the next generation of racists operating in our city here? I was stunned to read the comments made by the Yonkers IG's mom. I was stunned. And then I immediately began thinking about racism and how racism is learned. That's taught. You're not born a racist. Racism isn't something you're born with. We aren't born racist. We are taught to be racist. And I also began to think the possibility that our inspector general could have learned and adopted the same views and opinion towards the subject. Could have, possibly. If so, what kind of conflicts or issues could it lead to, or has it already led to? right? Going back to the affordable housing ordinance that was left for dead by every last one of the council members, including some of its biggest cheerleaders who made promises to their constituents based on the failed proposal, it would have forced developers to reserve an additional 10% of units in those um, the developments, the market rates for those who qualify for affordable housing in those developments going up near the water, which are market rate. However, political games being played, right? The council member, Tasha Diaz, made a complete 180, never introduced another proposal, and instead bragged about new affordable projects that were either in the planning stage, breaking ground, or were existing housing developments that were being rehabbed. While all were at different stages of development, one thing they all have in common is that they are all being planned to be built or being built in low income areas, the hood basically, right? Such as District 1, District 2, and District 3, and not just anywhere in those districts, right? Because we do, after all, have some gentrification going on. But for example, in District 1, they're being built in the predominantly Black community heading north, northwest side along Warburton Avenue, not on the waterfront, specifically on Alexander Street or in the pier area, right? Why not build them there? In District 2, new low-income affordable housing or mixed development was completed at the corner of Walnut and Elm Street in the No Dine Hill section, where there were multiple shootings last year, including one where a 6-year-old bystander was shot. Thank God he survived. And another incident where 4 individuals were shot by the same gunman. Who wants to live there, Corazon? It's no Ludlow Park community, that's for sure. Project, ain't that right? Okay, moving along in District 3, I believe anywhere there is the hood. So wherever one's going up in that district, it's going to be the hood. It's going to be the hood. And that's where the majority leader, Tasha Diaz, she represents District 3, and she obviously lives in the district, right? And that area, those 3 areas are predominantly Black and Hispanic, and those are the poorest 3 districts in the city. And that's where they're putting all the developments for low income or affordable housing. And that's what the developers and others within our government wanted. But who? It looks like we're regressing back to the late 80s, just dressed up nicely to cover up the ugly that lurks beneath the surface of the smiles. Don't let the fact that currently there sits 4 Black women or women of color on the council, aside from the city council president who is new, they are not there for you or I. No, not at all. Not at all. The image of the Yonkers City Council having 4 Black or 4 women of color is to further cover up the real power behind the decisions made here in the city of Yonkers. So all a facade. So who is the real power? And why have they been working hard to create a perception within the city that Yonkers is a place of above average equality, although it doesn't necessarily correctly reflect the minority population here, as Hispanics make up almost half of the population here in Yonkers, yet maybe have a quarter of the representation within our government, within anywhere in the city of Yonkers for that matter. So what kind of person works that hard to, to get as far away from the notion that Yonkers is a place where racism isn't alive and well, but it is, where they defeated segregation back in 1988, although it's looking like segregation 2022? Because if you look around, that's exactly what's happening. So are there still racists operating within our city government, power brokers who have influence beyond what you might think anyone should have? Is Yonkers still under the grip of the ideology and individuals who created a coalition to resist integrating housing, neighborhoods, and schools, city jobs, and government, et cetera, et cetera? Did the next generation of family and friends of those who fought to keep things segregated still make their way into our city and have control? I mean, one could make a good argument that, yes, Yonkers has remained somewhat segregated, primarily when it comes to housing. Again, look where the new low income and affordable housing are going up. Also, another thing I noticed is that on that Saturday when I went to the parade is that the southeast side hasn't seen much, if any, housing developments or any migration of people of color to that area much. Seems like one of the areas that hasn't really seen much migration, folks. And I'm not saying that it's an issue or nothing like that. I'm just saying that's an observation. I do see elsewhere, Lake Avenue has certainly changed a lot. And there are a lot of areas of Yonkers that have changed, that were predominantly white at one point and now are more mixed or have, more predominantly Hispanic or blacks. So things have changed. But it seems like the Southeast side remains. It remains the way it was so many, many years ago. And that's quite okay, because sometimes I wish we could go back to those days, not because of the segregation, but even the neighborhoods where I live seemed a bit more, family and community like, more togetherness, more respect. Kids nowadays, it's a whole nother podcast. But yeah, so what do you think, folks? What are your opinions? Put them in the comments. I'll respond to you and get back to you guys, but I'm definitely interested in hearing what you folks think. Do you believe that we still have races operating within our city? Is there an effort to continue to keep things segregated? It seems like that is the case. It seems like that is the case, right? So I just wanted to point that out. I appreciate to the individuals that sent me the information. Please continue to send me information. I appreciate it. I definitely appreciate that. It helps out a lot. And it gives me a great, opportunity to do a podcast. So thank you very much for sharing the information. So I also did share the article. So if you want to read the entire articles that I kind of took some clips from there, and I read a little bit from, they're on the Basement Politics page with Freddie Vasquez, Indy Unfiltered, I believe. I shared them a lot. So check them out. There's a few articles actually that I've shared. So you can check that out on the desegregation case of the 80s. But again, is it still active? Is it still alive and well? So is having the women of color on the council, and I've made this joke before, and I've, to people I said, they just setting people up, they put them there, and then they're gonna do all this gentrification and everything and get rid of, folks of color, and they're gonna say, well, it was 4 women of color on the council when it happened. I mean, it could have been a thing of race. As a joke. I don't know. Listen, but I mean, I do want to see more low income and affordable housing, not be, again, just congregated to the same areas along Ashburton, Warburton, Nodine Hill, right? I know they're doing affordable housing. Are they? Are they doing any for it on the Ludlow plan? I have to look that up. I'll let you know. I know they're doing that one at 66 and 70 Pierce Street, that piece of property that's being sold, or to the YIDA for $375,000, which will eventually go to a developer that's going to build a 36-unit building there. And unfortunately, that probably will have less than 10% units affordable. So they may have like maybe one apartment. They're going to fight to keep a lot of the affordable units and any low income units, that's for sure, out of the Ludlow Park area. Eileen O'Connor is not having that. She certainly don't want her bike trail going on Riverdale. So make sure you guys don't do that. All right? Don't do that. Folks are scary over there. A little too dark. But folks, listen, this should be an opportunity to have a conversation on race here in the city of Yonkers. I joke, I'm making jokes, but look, I don't have any issues with any people of any color. We all need to get along. We need to definitely, get together, and especially when it comes to politics, we need to unite behind the politics, and come out and vote. We need to come together as one. And lately I've been seeing people doing that. We've been doing that, right? We, CSEA, we're coming out, talking about it. We putting it on blast on the platform here. Also, yesterday I spoke about the woman who had her voucher terminated, right? And guess what? She's getting a lot of action now, a lot of action. People are responding. Her emails were being ignored. And now when she emails, she gets a response literally within seconds. That's the power of voices, right? Our voices. We have to be consistent. We have to keep speaking out, right? So we have to make sure that our schools, especially our schools, right? That they are all given the same equal treatment because, folks, think about it. They're still pretty much segregated. I mean, there's like one or two schools that everyone likes, Pulaski and DeCharo. I think YMA is pretty good too, right? But it's not a lot of options. So people have to choose, right? And hope that your kid gets into one of those schools. So it's stressful for parents. It shouldn't be that way. All the schools should be the same in terms of the resources, the quality of education, right? They should all be the same. But that's what happened in the 80s. The schools that were on the southwest side were not given any attention, and that's where most of the kids of color were assigned to. I went to Catholic school, back in 87 and 88. So I didn't really wasn't affected by that until I eventually went to public school in 89. And I went to school 16, which is all up in a white neighborhood. And that's when I started hanging out with Italians, man. And I like the Italian. I love Italians. You guys are awesome. Irish guys are awesome too. Puerto Ricans are awesome. We super awesome. Yeah, a little extra awesome. Dominican awesome. I mean, come on. Let's like honestly, that racial stuff, it's really people with small brains. I mean, if you're intelligent, if you're an intelligent human being, you have to look past race. You have to, because race does not determine anything at all of a person's character. Absolutely nothing. It does not. I mean, it's their environment. I'm talking about, not genetics. Obviously, genetics, there are some things, right? But, you're not genetically going to be a criminal because your genetics. You're not going to be, oh, well, you are predisposed to, drug addiction through genetics, but you're not going to be a poor necessarily because of your genetics. You're not going to be a criminal because of your genetics. Maybe, I don't know. Could be an argument for that too. But so, yeah. So, I mean, but for the most part, our environment shapes us, right? And that's what makes us who we are. So we need to focus on that. Again, racism and anyone who's racism, that's small-minded, that's, very simpleton of you. I always said that anyone who's a racist is not really intelligent people. It's very stupid. It's very stupid. So hopefully we don't have this. I wanted to point that out because I want people to start thinking. The individuals that are within the city government, where do they come from? Offspring, right? The lineage. Again, racism is learned. You're taught this type of behavior. So if your parents are racist, more than likely, you're going to be a racist. I mean, that's just the way it is. I don't make the rules. God does, right, folks? So think about that. See what's going on here in the city of Yonkers. I'm going to go and dig some more. There's a lot more there. We're going to dig it up. I'm not going to do the part 2 on the Macy because, like I said last night, if you guys respond and, then I'm going to just chill with that. And I'm going to chill with that. I'm a man of my word. All right? Tomorrow's Friday, baby. Friday, TGIF. That means it's the weekend review. So make sure you join me tomorrow night for the weekend review. We'll go over the week. We'll recap everything. Some of the things I spoke about. There might be some new stuff to talk about. I will be discussing this Sunday. Housing. I am going to look. Actually, I'm not done with you guys. Municipal Housing Agency of the City of Yonkers. Is it private? Did it become a private entity? Is it a private company? Did the YIDA become a private entity? Are individuals now profiting off these entities that started out as government agencies or government entities that were to benefit the people? Have they become private corporations, private companies? Have they been privatized, owned by individuals who are now reaping the rewards of all these properties? That's what I'm hearing. I got to dig into that. So lots changing. I hear Cuomo, before he left, signed some stuff. Housing developments are going private. These rich investors buying things up. We'll be discussing that on Monday. I'm going to do my homework. Let's find out. Did Macy go private? Is that a private company? If anybody tell me, I haven't done the research, but I've been hearing that. Maybe some folks from Macy could reach out. Maybe some folks from the YIDA could reach out. Anyway, folks, have a good night. 12:15. I'm out of here. Thank you for joining me. Again, watch out for the racists. Come on. Come on. I am Freddie Vasquez. This is Basement Politics. That was Yonkers, the desegregation case, the next generation. Are there still racist operatives in the city of Yonkers government? Are there individuals who are the next generation of those who fought to keep things segregated here in the city of Yonkers? And are they still working to keep things segregated? Where are they developing all the low income and affordable housing now? They fought to keep us, I say us because I'm still part of you guys, us up out of the waterfront by not increasing the affordable housing ordinance. They bragged about building new developments for affordable housing and low income housing, but where are they building them? Do the apartments come with bulletproof vests? How about Kevlar helmets? What about an AK? Protect myself? I mean, no Dine Hill, chill. Your blood will get spilled for real. And that's a fact. That's a fact. Unfortunately, I've experienced that my uncle was murdered on No Dine Hill. And that's where you're putting the folks that need rental assistance or just need assistance in general. You son of a...
Freddie wins. Fatality.
I'm out of here.
Freddie wins. Fatality.
You're watching Basement Politics with my dad, Freddie Vasquez. You're watching Basement Politics with my dad, Freddie Vasquez.
We're going to leave it where it is. Let's vote on this. Let's get it popping. We're going to leave it where it is. Let's vote on this. Let's get it popping. I was raised in housing. 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 I don't think.
Game over. Freddie wins.
No!
Fatality.
Peace out.